So just to give a quick introduction of Noam. So Noam has experience conducting UX research for leading companies in Silicon Valley, including Airbnb, Intercom, and is now directing Wealthfront's user research division. In this session, he'll be breaking down the most common UX research mistakes that founders and early stage startups should avoid. He also has a newsletter on everything UX, which I will link to in the chat. Noam is very excited to be moving to the Miami area soon, and he will be joining the Miami Tech community. So the floor is all yours, Noam.
Thanks a bunch. It's really, really good to be here. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to talk about how to avoid some classic founder research fails, but not just founder, really, if you're building technology products and you're doing research and maybe you don't have the benefit of having dedicated researchers and you're just trying to figure things out, then hopefully you learn something new today. And I also just want to say, if anyone has questions of any sort, I'm really happy to answer them. Please add them to the chat, the Q&A, and I'll take them as we go. So let me know. I wanted to share a little bit about myself, first of all. So my name is Noam Siegel, and I have kind of 3 lines here representing 3 periods in my life. I was born and raised in Israel. I sound suspiciously British because both of my parents are English. And as an Israeli, I served in the Air Force for 5 years. And when I left the Air Force, I joined the military industries as the UX lead for some of Israel's missile defense systems. And that was my first UX job. So that was at a company called Elbit Systems. And at the same time, I also got my undergrad degree in psychology at the IDC Herzliya. Then in 2012, I moved with my wife and dog and cat and 4 suitcases to Illinois. And I attended UIUC, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, got my Ph.D. in psychology. So my academic training is in psychology. And then we moved to Silicon Valley, where I got to work at Airbnb and then Intercom. And these days, I work at a company called Wealthfront. I've been there for 2.25 years. Wealthfront is a financial technology company. We do banking, saving, investing. And in addition to that, I'm up to a few other things. One of them is I'm the founder and creator of UX Quests, which is both a YouTube channel and a newsletter around everything to do with UX, and especially UX research topics. And right now on YouTube, for example, I'm doing the 2nd season of something called UXR Conversations, where I have conversations with researchers and research leaders about a bunch of research topics. Another thing I'm up to, which I wanted to mention here, because it relates to the presentation, is I'm currently developing a course, which you might be interested in. It's a course around foundational skills for UX researchers. So in case there are any researchers in the room or people very interested in research, it might be relevant. And I want to give a huge shout out to Lenny Rachitsky, my friend, who also has been giving a course on the same platform I have just joined. And many of the slides you'll see today are inspired by or credited to him and a presentation he crafted about research, which I gave him feedback on. So I really thank him especially for that. Okay, and thank you, Laura, by the way, get in touch. So we're gonna talk about 3 ways today that you may be getting customer obsession wrong. So if you have customers or users or clients or whatever you call them, it's pretty fashionable these days to be obsessed with your customers and to do research and to get insights. But the problem is we often make really foundational mistakes and don't get it right. And so I want to talk about three of those cases. And I want us to think of it in terms of the UX research funnel, or you might see it as the product development funnel. So we begin by trying to discover what's the pain point that we're going to address with this company that we founded or that we're part of. And that's a very kind of generative and broad stage within the product development cycle and within the research cycle. Then we're trying to assess desirability. Do users really need this. And that, I would say, is the stage when we're trying to reach product market fit. So we're going to talk about one of the classic techniques for assessing product market fit and why it may be flawed in certain ways, or it may be a great idea to use it. And the third stage, which is very evaluative and concrete, is around dependability or usability. Can users actually use this thing? Is it usable? Is it easy, etc.? And so when you think about the goals for each of these stages and how they relate to the research type, if we take the example of ordering food online, so the discovery stage, what's the pain point? I'm trying to understand the biggest challenges people have with ordering food online. When we move down to desirability, it's understanding whether our concept addresses those food ordering challenges. Again, is there product market fit? And then the third stage, the dependability or usability stage, is around understanding opportunities to improve conversion through the sign-up flow. And that's, of course, one of many examples, because usability, dependability, you assess them for every part, every flow, every area of your product service. Okay, so again, if you have any questions, feel free to chat them. And I think I'm monitoring at least the chat, if not the Q&A. But for now, let's jump into founder research fail number 1, failing to apply the scientific method, so to speak. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So we're in the discovery phase. We're just trying to understand what the pain point is, right? That's where we're at. And I want to do a super scientific survey, okay? And please feel free to chat your answers. Why do we do research? You ready for my super scientific survey here? Is it to gather insights into what your customers want, or is it to gather insights into what your customers need? I'll give you a minute here. Add your answer to the chat quick. You can just write number 1, number 2, or something else if you don't think it's relevant. Gavin is saying number 2. Alejandro, 2. Everyone's on board. Does anyone have an answer that's not 2 or even not 1? Maybe something else? 1. Okay. So by far, the winning vote here goes to number 2, to gather insights into what your customers need. But this was a trick question. Sorry about that. It's neither. The answer, you ready? The answer is that we are not trying to gather insights into what customers want. And we shouldn't really be trying to gather insights into what customers need. We are trying to gather insights into customers' pain points. That's the key. Every great startup, every great story also, in my opinion, starts with pain, a real problem that is yet unsolved or not solved in a good way. And that's what we're trying to get at when we're at this discovery stage. Later on, there are other things we're trying to get at as well. But your company, if you're founders and you're watching this, your company wins by eliminating pain. That's what you're actually trying to do. And the job of a researcher or anyone conducting research is to help eliminate that pain by identifying what it is. That's the first stage, right? Before you do anything else. And so, again, courtesy of Lenny, I have some great examples here of pain points that some of the most amazing companies right now solved. Zoom, astonishingly, built like $100 billion company plus by working on video conferencing. And there were many solutions to video conferencing before Zoom came out, right? Many. And yet it was still difficult and it was still unreliable. And Zoom solved those pain points. Not perfectly, by the way. I still have some pain points with Zoom. But all in all, Peloton, and especially when COVID hit, people don't make it to the gym and they need to exercise. And these days they couldn't make it to the gym in many areas of the United States and the world because gyms were closed. So perfect timing for Peloton. Spotify, I'm of the generation who still used to buy cassette tapes and CDs, and it was hard to find the things I wanted and pretty expensive. And Spotify just abstracted out all of that pain, took it away. Shopify, again, an amazing company, absolutely incredible company. It used to be so hard to build an online store. And I'm going to show you later a website I built where I sell some kind of merchandise or swag. And I built it over a weekend, not even, over half of a Saturday. Incredible. And Dropbox and Google Drive, etc., cloud computing, the ability to keep your files safe and backed up and not have the pain of losing a bunch of things or things not being updated, not being able to collaborate with people. So the best companies in the world, any company that succeeds really, it's probably because they solved meaningful, deep pain points. Don't forget that. That's why we do research. It's to find those. But we make mistakes. Founders make mistakes. For example, I have what Wes Kao, who I'm very fortunate to work with, calls a spiky point of view. So my spiky point of view, and by that I mean something I feel quite strongly about and many people might not agree with, is that dog fooding is really helpful. Do you know what dog fooding is in the context of our realm of tech? Can anyone chat what dog fooding is and help us define that for a bit? I'd love to hear from you. I'm getting a no idea. So definitely some questions around what is dog fooding? There you go, Jimena. Testing your own products, right? So by dog fooding, I mean that you are trying out the product you're building in an attempt to figure out how well it works, right? And does it solve pain points? The thing is, you are not your user. You are not your user, you are not your customer. Even if you think you are, even if you feel the pain that you're solving for others, you don't know what they're feeling. And so just trying out your own product as a way to kind of mitigate for the lack of research you're doing, it doesn't work. Because at this stage, you do not understand who your customers will be. You don't. You do not understand what they need. And you do not understand how to sell it to them. So I'm not a huge believer in dog fooding. I think you need to be testing your product for bugs and doing, QA, sorry. But you need to do a lot more than that at this stage to get things right. You can't just start applying all of these fancy research and marketing techniques. You might have heard some of these, like the value versus complexity quadrant or the Kano model. It doesn't work at this stage because you have no idea who the users are and whether the pain you think they may be feeling is anything close to reality. So you need to get out of the office. I'm not sure how easy it is to see this, but what I'm showing you is one of the most famous emails in the history of tech. I used to work at Airbnb. This is an email from Brian Chesky, the CEO and co-founder of Airbnb, to Paul Graham, who was the founder of Y Combinator, perhaps the most famous tech accelerator, and investors, etc. And Brian was sending Paul an email about becoming ramen profitable. And by that, it means that you're making just enough revenue that you can live off of ramen and be profitable, essentially. And so he's showing this chart to Paul about how many fees they brought in that week. And it's hilarious because Airbnb made $734 that week. They're making quite a bit more these days. And Paul's answer to Brian Chesky and to the founders of Airbnb was, man, I wish every product with this focus. What this tells me is that it's a really good idea to get out there and do things like recruit high-value users in New York. He's telling them the best thing you can do is to get out of the office because it will help you understand your users. And what famously happened when Paul Graham told this to the founders is that they got on a flight to New York and they went to the apartments of some of the first hosts on Airbnb. And one of the things they discovered when they were there is that the photos that hosts were taking of their homes were not doing those apartments justice. And the pain point that people trying to book were having, the real pain point was they weren't getting a great idea of what these apartments looked like and how suitable they were to their needs. And that was a real problem. So Joe Gebbia, one of the co-founders, was actually the first kind of professional photographer of apartments. And they took all of these photos of each apartment. And ever since then, one of the well-known drivers of Airbnb's success, at first at least, was the quality of the photos and the way they presented apartments to people waiting to book. So getting out of the office, going to your users, even if it's remotely, by the way, is incredibly important. And how do you do that? How do you do things like get out of the office? So one idea is to just pick a few key customers, key users, just like Paul suggested, go to those New York first hosts and build relationships with them, direct relationships with them. Just email them, call them, go visit them if you're able to and allowed to, connect with them. Really, really important. The second thing is you can build systems around getting out of your office. For example, at Wealthfront, we call our customers clients. And so I came up with the idea to have regular sessions of coffee with clients where we dedicate a whole day of the week just to get coffee with our clients. We select a random sample, we send them Starbucks gift cards, and we have coffee for 20 minutes. And we just listen to what's on their mind and what pain they have. And we also have prospects, potential clients. So we invented Pizza with Prospects, where we'll order some pizzas for people and again, just talk to them about their pain. So it's a fun way just to build systems around always connecting with your users, your customers every day. And then finally, there may be a bunch of things already happening in your company, especially if it's at a slightly later stage. Maybe you're doing some customer support, for example, would be a classic example, right? Can you join some of those calls? Can you shadow? Can you do some customer support yourself and hear about the pain points that your customers have? Then there's a question of, well, okay, I'm starting to understand that I need to get out of the office, and I even know how to do that to a certain extent, but who do I talk to? So maybe think about who your most passionate users are and start with them, your earliest adopters. What's on their minds before you go any broader? You could think about who would feel the most pain if your product didn't exist and try to talk to them first. You can think about your segmentation. Do you have any idea of what your segments might be? Have you done some research around that? Can you try and find some people in each segment and talk to them? And then finally, who do you trust to give you valuable insights? Maybe there's a certain group, a certain characteristic, a demographic or psychographic that will help you decide who you should be listening to. Now, at Wealthfront, we use a system called customer development, and it does resemble the scientific method I mentioned earlier quite a bit. The idea is that you run two kind of distinct periods of research. There's the search for your customer, the search for understanding your customer and testing hypotheses with them. And then there's the execution, building out the company, building out the product, iterating on it, and so forth. In the discovery phase, especially, what you're doing is you're trying to identify pain points and testing those hypotheses to see how desperate people may be for the sort of product you're building. And this is what you're looking for. At Wealthfront, we call this leaning over the table. You're looking for people who are begging to just throw their money at you and buy your products. And they're probably doing that. Why? Not because you understand what they want, not because you understood what they need, but because you understood their pain so well that they are willing to let you solve it because what else are they going to do? Continue experiencing that pain? No. So that's number one. I just want to stop there for a second, see if anyone has any questions. Please add them to the chat. I'm trying to monitor the Q&A as well, but nothing's coming up for me there. So we can just use the chat. Does anyone have any questions about that first point and kind of getting out of the office, using customer development? Mark, if you have a question, go ahead, just add it to the chat and I'd be happy to answer before we move on. Feel free. And I'll also leave some time at the end of the discussion. So type out your questions and I'll get to it.
There's one in the Q&A box.
Yeah, so I'm seeing a question around, at which point do you decide to pivot after the research? So, you know, 90, I'm not sure what the exact statistic is these days, but 90-something% of startups fail. And so when you think of pain, I would suggest that you need it to be prominent, right? And I said on purpose at the end there that you're looking for, let me bring this slide back up. You're looking for this very strong reaction to what you're building. You're looking for people to really, especially if you feel like you're targeting the right audience here with your research, you know, this is the audience you hypothesize will be your key audience. If they are not begging you to build this really soon, if they're not signing up for wait lists, if they're not emailing you again and again about when is this thing going to be ready, you probably want to pivot because you have not landed on the relevant pain, right? And so I know that's not like too much of a specific answer, but basically you're looking for a very strong reaction, because if 90-something% of startups fail, you can't afford for people to be like, you know, this sounds kind of cool, maybe I'd try it. That's not going to get you to where you want to be. It's not going to get you to build an iconic company like Shopify or Zoom or Peloton or other such companies that we mentioned. So that would be my recommendation. It's about being very focused and directed on eliciting that sort of strong emotion. And if you're not, you probably haven't landed on the right thing. But there's a lot of nuance there, which we can maybe cover later. Okay, so I want to go over the second point, which is product market misfit. And by the way, again, I'm going to say some things here that are controversial, okay? And I want to mention something at this point also. I'm a researcher by training and in my heart. I'm not a founder. I have never founded a successful company. I haven't done that really hard work. I really admire people who do. The most I've founded is kind of my you know, UX Quest YouTube channel or newsletter or this course I'm starting, but it's not a business in the same way that a tech startup is. So there will be some controversial things here. I just want to acknowledge that I'm one person with one opinion, and I'm not a founder myself. So you can take it or leave it. But when we talk about desirability, and when we talk about do users really need this thing, we're really talking about product market fit. And in case you ever watched House, which is one of my favorite TV shows ever, House always says that everybody lies. Everybody lies. People will deceive you. And this really, really matters, because if everybody lies, then your customers will be deceiving you as well. Not on purpose, not because of any malice or you know, bad intentions, but they will deceive you. And what I mean by that is that they're lying to you. Why would they do that? Why are they saying things that they don't really mean? It's because we are bad at predicting future behavior. So we say we will do things, but we don't. We are bad at knowing the best solution for something versus the easy solution. we tend to tell people what we think they want to hear. And later in this presentation, I'll get to how we can combat that. We're influenced by people, easily influenced by people, and we just forget things. We forget things. If you survey people about something that happened a year ago, they're not going to remember properly. If you ask them about something that happened a couple of weeks ago, they might. Okay, so consider that. And so one easy rule of thumb to think about, and we'll get to a couple of examples where that isn't the case in research, is you don't want to ask people about the future because they cannot speak to it. None of us are prophets, and we misattribute things, and we don't understand what's really going to happen and what we're actually going to do. So you ask them about past behavior. How have you used this thing in the past? Not will you use this, right? This is something that all founders, I think, are dying to do. They want to know, are you going to use this thing? Do you love it? But you can't really be asking that because it's not going to work out and people can't report on it. By the way, I'm seeing things in the Q&A, but I can't seem to open it. So Jimena or Rodrigo, if you can help me at some point by sharing what those questions are, I'd be happy to answer them.
Sure. I think you already answered one. The second one was, how can you prioritize multiple pain points from your interviews with customers?
Yeah. So one thing I'll say about that is that when it comes to prioritization is that we work very collaboratively in tech, right? So if you're fortunate enough to have dedicated researchers, we work with product managers, engineers, and designers. And so once we figure out what those pain points are, there are many models for prioritization. One of them, I'll bring it up here. I'm forgetting the name, so I don't want to get this wrong, is from Gibson Biddle, who I really appreciate. He's a well-known product leader, and he developed a model called the GEM model. And GEM stands for growth, engagement, and monetization. So what are you focused on? What do you care more about at the stage you're at? Are you focused on growth? And therefore you want to figure out, you want to start with the pain points that relate to growth? Are you focused on engagement and kind of monthly retention? Or are you focused on monetization? And that's, by the way, one framework of many frameworks that exist. But just, based on this framework, if you're trying to focus on growth right now and kind of getting people in, then you want to be focusing on any pain points that relate to that, et cetera, et cetera. So it just really depends, and there's a ton of frameworks to use. And by the way, if you want to learn a lot more about product development, product frameworks, endless resources, then I really recommend, again, Lenny's newsletter. I believe it's at Lenny's newsletter. It's at lennywachitsky.com. So Wachitsky, I can add this to the chat, right? Let me do that quick. So other than my newsletter, I very much, and websites, etc., I really recommend Lenny's resources. He has some amazing ideas, amazing frameworks, an amazing Slack community, etc., etc. Okay, so again, you want to pay attention to what people actually do and to their pain, because anything involving the future is an over-optimistic lie, coming from Rob Fitzpatrick, who's the author of The Mum Test, a great book about UX research. Okay, so here comes the controversial bit, okay? There's this famous product market fit test called the Sean Ellis test. And it was popularized by someone much more talented than I am, the Superhuman founder and CEO, Rahul Vohra. Superhuman, in case you don't know it, is an email client, an advanced email client for kind of email power users who are not satisfied with Gmail or Outlook or whatever you use. And it's incredibly popular. And The Sean Ellis test, as it's known, is really the following question, basically. Ask your users how they'd feel if they could no longer use your product. The group that answers very disappointed will unlock product market fit. The way Superhuman did this when they were doing their research was they asked 4 questions. Number 1, how would you feel if you could no longer use Superhuman? Number 2, what type of people do you think would most benefit from Superhuman? Number 3, what is the main benefit you receive from Superhuman? And number 4, how can we improve Superhuman for you? So I want to do a little exercise. Let's play identify the research fail, okay? And again, before we do, I cannot stress this enough. Superhuman is a very successful company. Something worked for them. I don't think it's really this, and I wouldn't actually recommend using this, but they did well. So this is a discussion, but feel free to use this if you feel like it works well for your purposes. So I'd love for you to chat. What do you feel like is the research fail when it comes to this particular question? How would you feel if you could no longer use your company's name? What's the problem with this question? Is there any problem with this question? I'd love to hear from you in the chat if you have any ideas. We did talk about one thing for sure that is a problem with this question. It's futuristic. Yeah, it's about future behavior. So Laura and Enrique, thank you. That is one of the problems with this. There's a lot of research in my realm of psychology about something called affective forecasting, affective with an A, so emotional forecasting. And it's about how we are really, can I like curse a bit in this talk, Jimena? Is that, can I use words like shit? Are we okay with shit?
I think we're adults. Go ahead.
We're adults. We can use words like shit. We as human beings are pretty shit when it comes to predicting how we will feel in the future. For example, there's a lot of research about winning the lottery and how we all think that if we win the lottery, we will be the happiest ever forever. It will completely change our happiness. But when there has been so much research on this, it turns out that even after people win the lottery and they think they will be incredibly happy, they end up going back to their regular happiness levels very, very quickly. It's actually kind of a tragic thing. And so we do not understand how we will actually feel if we couldn't use something, if we won something. It doesn't really work. And so I might say, yeah, I mean, I think I'd be very disappointed, but then something else would come up, some alternative to Superhuman, and I'd go use it, and it wouldn't bother me at all. So I don't love this question. What about this one? What type of people do you think would most benefit from Superhuman? Is there an issue with this question? Any problem you can think of? Again, I'm curious to hear your take. And yes, Santiago, shit just got real, that's for sure. What's the issue here? Why can't I ask what type of people do you think would most benefit from Superhuman? Personal bias, thanks, Ram. Open question. I'm okay with open questions, by the way, in surveys. You should use them sparingly. You don't want to use too many open questions. But if a survey has 4 questions, I'm okay if one of them or a couple of them are open. But I think Enrique kind of captured the issue here. I don't care what you think about which other people would benefit. Remember, we're trying to get out of the office. We're trying to talk to actual people about their needs. If what you're doing is asking some other person about what they think some other people need, you're not getting out of the office. You are again letting someone determine your company's course and your product development course. And so yes, to Santiago's point, You're talking to me, you think I'm a user, either I am a potential user, or if I'm not qualified to tell you who is. I don't know who's feeling this pain. So why ask? I'm not so sure. What about this one? What's the main benefit you receive from Superhuman? What's the issue here, if any? In my opinion, there is an issue. Did I mention Superhuman is awesome, by the way? You should check it out. I just don't love the way they did their research. And I think it could be so much more awesome if they did better research. So Jimena is correct that, I mean, it does assume you receive a benefit, but it might be a fair assumption because you are surveying people who have been using the product. So they probably get some sort of benefit. But I would suggest the problem is that the focus is wrong here, because even though I might be getting a particular benefit, I might still be experiencing a lot of pain around email. And we should be focusing on pain more than anything else, right? We talked about that. The focus should be on pain. And that should lead to us building beneficial products. So I don't really care what the main benefit is personally. What about how can we improve Superhuman for you? Any problems there? Maybe I can help you out with this one. I believe in the importance of visionary leaders. I love to work with visionary leaders. And I think that as technology experts, we should figure out how to build amazing products that solve real pain, real problems. And what typically happens if we ask people, hey, what else could we do to improve this product for you? Or there's the magic wand question. Do you know the magic wand question? The magic wand question is, if you could wave a magic wand and introduce any feature into this product, what would you want? People just don't know how to answer that. They never have a good answer for it because they don't have a vision for what the product should be. You should have that vision. It's your job. It's not their job. So think about that. So here's an example of just a list of bad questions that you just don't want to use. Would you ever use this feature? Would you buy this product? Do you think it's a good idea? How much would you pay? Psst, don't believe you. Don't believe you for a second. Would you pay this for a product that did that? Do you think people would use this? They don't work, these questions. They just don't. So don't ask them. What should you be asking? Things like, how are you dealing with this problem now? Or talk me through an actual scenario when this thing happened. Talk me through your workflow. What else have you tried that hasn't worked? Why do you bother doing this thing? What's the most frustrating part? And a fun question to ask always is there anything I haven't asked, but I should have? Anything else you wanted to share? Always end a research conversation with that. Sometimes I get like really cool stuff out of that final question. Okay, so I just want to pause a bit before we move on. We kind of talked about 2 points really: getting out of the office and focusing on pain. There was just a lot of content there, a lot of tips that I hope some of you find helpful. Any questions or comments before we move on? And again, I'm only monitoring the chat. I'm not sure if the Q&A is a separate thing, so drop it in the chat, or Jimena and Rodrigo can tell me if anything else comes up. If you don't have any questions, and this is super clear, write no, or I don't have questions. That would be helpful too. I'm curious to hear if so far this is landing and working for you, and you're getting maybe 1 or 2 helpful ideas for your own businesses, your own research. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Mark is asking, what is the pain or problem you think social audio platforms like Clubhouse is solving? Amazing question. I love Clubhouse, by the way, and I'm going live on Clubhouse tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time to talk about research with an amazing research leader called Steve Portugal. In my view, Clubhouse has seen the growth it's seen because of the situation we're all in. We are trying to do so many things at home. I'm trying to work a full-time plus job, do other side projects, be a parent, be a teacher, because my child is learning from home 3 days a week and only 2 days a week at school, so much stuff. And I'm completely zoomed out, as we say. I cannot take screens anymore. It's just terrible. And so to me, the pain is that we want to connect with people, we want to connect with our community, we want to learn, but we wish we could do it in a more kind of casual way that doesn't require us to show up wearing certain things or looking a certain way or focusing on people. We just want to listen, but we want to be part of the conversation too, because podcasts don't solve the pain for us, that we want to be involved in the conversation. You can't do that with just by listening to a podcast. So Clubhouse gives us an opportunity to resolve the pain points around live video and everything that takes from us and the concentration it takes. When it's just my phone, I can be walking around anywhere. I can be holding my baby. I can be, outside with my dog or whatever. It's so convenient. So I think Clubhouse's growth is partially because of just the situation we're all in right now, and how crazy it's been. I'm in California, so at least in California, it's been pretty crazy. Let's move on to the third and final point.
No, you have one question. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
In the QA box.
Okay.
I'm going to read it out to you, and I'm also going to paste it in the other chat, which is, we have thousands of visitors that reach some of our informative web pages looking for medical answers, but they don't continue the process to consult a doctor. What is the most effective way to reach them and understand their motivation behind their visit? From Mauricio.
Yes. Yeah, so thank you, Maria. I appreciate the question. I'm going to get to some of my favorite research tools at the end. One of them is an in-product survey tool, which I really recommend, called Usability. Or there are other tools to do this, but basically, you probably see this all the time on websites you use. I can trigger a quick survey or invite people to interview based on them visiting a particular page, clicking on a particular thing, or doing something. And so that's one way to address this. It's to send out surveys to people who don't seem to be kind of moving forward to that consultation stage and trying to figure out, what's happening, and why, maybe consulting a doctor isn't the pain they're feeling, right? But they're feeling like they don't have reliable information about their medical issue. So one way to do that is through those kind of intercept surveys, where you intercept people as they're on the web page before they kind of leave and do something else, to see what their motivation is. That would be one answer. There are other opportunities, but definitely look into that sort of thing. And also, if those people are logged in or you've collected their emails in some way, you can even do it afterwards, right? So you can just sample a random sample of people who visited certain pages and figure out why they didn't move forward with consultations. There might be segments there as well. For example, it might be the case that people who are looking for certain types of information don't intend to go to any doctor. Not through your website and not through any website. Maybe they're looking for information for a friend or family member, etc. So there's so many options there. And by the way, to anyone joining us today, I'd be more than happy to chat later on and help you with your research. So just know that even if we don't have time today, I'm available to you. Jimena and Rodrigo have already linked, I think, to some of my details. Please feel free to find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, or email me at noamseg, NOAMSEG @gmail.com. Let me put it in there just so you have
And you
it.
also have 3 more questions in the Q&A if you'd like me to read them.
Yeah, I'll do a lightning round. Let's do that. Go ahead.
Okay, quick one. Anonymous attendee asks, any suggestion about what to do if we are after product market fit?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to do. And in fact, we're going to get into a bit of that here, because now we're going to get into how do I make sure my product isn't just a great fit, but also really usable and really helpful. So maybe I'll answer that question by just moving forward. So what are the other 2 questions?
Sure. The other one is from Laura Serrano. How can you tell stakeholders that the feature that is being built is not going to solve the pain and it would be good to reassess?
Yeah. The one thing I'll say about that is that there are many ways in which you can present insights. The most impactful one by far, this probably won't surprise anyone, is video. Video is so impactful. When you show a stakeholder, an executive, a video of a research participant, one of your users, one of your customers, and they can either see their pain, their real pain. It's like, oh, you know, I hate that I can't do it. It's stopping me from living the life I want. I don't have any options. This is so bad. When they see that emotion, it's really impactful. Or when they see the delight and the surprise in people's eyes as they see your product and how happy they are about this and how excited they are to try it, that's also really impactful. So in my view, by far, the most effective way is to create highlight reels and edit video. And there's tools to do that, by the way. One great tool is called Redux. I just added it to the chat to help you do that. That's, in my view, the best way to convince people. Any other questions so far?
Yes, there was one more, which
Okay.
is at Wealthfront, how do you understand customer pain point?
Yeah, so again, at Wealthfront, we use a tactic called custom development, which I did not get into in great detail here, but I'd be more than happy to add some more information. Custom development was originally developed by or identified by a guy called Steve Blank, and Steve Blank has written a bunch of books about the topic that are really, really helpful to understand how you actually do custom development. So that's a technique we use to identify pain points. There are other ways to do so. And again, most successful startups start with a pain point that maybe you felt, or your parents felt, or your grandparents felt, or so forth. I'll give a very, very, very quick example. There's a company I love called Fast. They are doing one-click checkout for the rest of the internet, everyone besides Amazon, obviously. And that company started because Dom, the founder, his grandmother was trying to do some online shopping for food, and she just couldn't for the life of her figure out how to check out and how to actually buy food. And she has limited mobility. She couldn't, just go out of the home. And so he decided to create the checkout experience he would want for her, because she was feeling that pain so strongly. So I'll leave it at that. I just want to get through a few more ideas, maybe take one more question at the end, or a couple more questions, and then again, feel free to reach out anytime. So we're now at the usability stage. Can people actually use this thing? And I wanted to talk about some classic usability mistakes and great tips from great researchers other than myself. So these are the topics: discounting the who, not being teachable, doing stupid shit, going in empty-handed, and using stat speak. So I'm just going to go over these briefly, and you can check out the resources I linked to. So number one is creating usability profiles. So the idea is people differ in how they react in research situations. And so a really great idea is to create usability profiles, to think about who your participants are. Are they a mouse? Are they a talker? Are they a naysayer? And then you adjust your moderation techniques, your interview techniques to fit those profiles. Really powerful tip. Always remember who you're talking to and how that might affect the research. Second of all, always be learning. Stay teachable. It's amazing how every time you find some sort of flaw, more flaws come up, more things come up. It's really important to have an open mind and always be learning. And too many of us don't stay teachable, which would be a huge mistake when you're at the usability phase. The third thing is just don't do stupid shit. For example, especially when you're doing remote testing, you can't have poor internet. You can't have a room full of distractions. You can't have new, shiny, but dysfunctional tech. I want to focus on number 7, actually, which would be using a script and not a guide. What I mean by that is that when you do research, you might create a script, like, these are the questions I want to ask. But if you only focus on those questions and you literally treat it like a script, your research won't be very good. You want to treat it as a guide, because the magic is in the follow-up question, not the question you planned, the follow-up question. So don't call it a script, call it a guide, and think about your follow-up questions. Not having go-to phrases is a bad idea. So if you're just building a company now, you don't have research support, you're not really sure how to do this, talk to a researcher like myself or any other researcher you know in your network, and figure out some go-to phrases, some go-to questions that you can always fall back on or use that you know are effective questions. Don't just wing every single usability test. Build templates that you know work for your company. And leave stat speak out of it. Remember, if you're doing some sort of usability test on 5 people, 10 people, however many people, you can't say things about thick data like everyone said this or 7 out of 8 people said that, because you don't have a large enough sample to make any suggestions about a majority or a minority. You just don't. For that, you need to run a survey or large-scale research. And then finally, there are so many biases in research that you have to watch out for. A couple of examples. You might have heard of social desirability bias, for example, which is the bias that says we want to look good in front of other people. So when we're in front of other people, we don't want to say things that seem socially undesirable. Or acquiescence bias is the fact that people tend to agree with things. So I don't use agreement scales in my surveys because people will usually lean towards agreeing. So don't ask people if they agree with you, because they usually will. Okay, we're almost running out of time, although I can stay for a few minutes longer if you guys can. But I wanted to mention a couple more things. Number 1, I despise NPS. I think NPS is the worst. NPS is Net Promoter Score. I think it's a terrible measure of customer satisfaction, which is why I created the website npsistheworst.com. And you should go check it out if you want to learn more about why I think NPS is the wrong metric for you to use if you're trying to understand whether your customers love you. This, by the way, is NPS. In case you don't know it, you've probably seen it before. How likely are you to recommend company to a friend or colleague from 0 to 10? You have promoters, detractors. It's terrible. Why is it terrible? We don't have time to get into that. But again, check out npsistheworst.com. It's a fun website. I don't recommend it for anything. So for me, it's in general terrible. But again, that's a spiky point of view. It's a hill I'm willing to die on. Not everyone agrees. Feel free to disagree or to ask me later on why I believe this. And then I just wanted to mention some of my favorite tools for better research. You can see them here. These are my choices. This is like my tech stack for research. And in case you're thinking about doing research and you're not sure what tools to use, then these are some of the things I use. And if you want any advice on tools, then again, feel free to get in touch and ask any questions you have. What books would I recommend to be a better UX researcher? Well, one book I love, it has a great name. It's called Think Like a UX Researcher. It's a really great book. So I definitely recommend that one. And then a couple more I recommend from really great methodologists. Steve Portugal, who I'm talking to tomorrow on Clubhouse, he is, in my opinion, one of the best research interviewers I know. He's an incredible interviewer, and he wrote a couple of books. One of them is about interviews, so you should check his stuff out. And then Sam Ladner is another amazing researcher, and she wrote a book called Mixed Methods, which is a really great introduction to a bunch of different methods you can use in UX research. Eugenia, thank you for your question. A lot of people use NPS, right? NPS is really well known, so don't feel bad, and feel free to disagree with me. But if you want to learn about why it sucks and what can replace it, so why it's bad, one reason is it's asking about future behavior, which is a big problem. And what can replace it? There's a bunch of options. One of them is CSAT, you might have heard of. Another is ANPS, actual NPS, asking about whether you did recommend the product already rather than future behavior. Check out the website for all of the relevant details. What makes people addicted to products? Is it a pure pain point solving or something else? No, addiction is not related just to pain points. For example, the reason TikTok is so addicting, and I love it, is because they have been able to develop an incredible ranking algorithm, which serves you videos that are absolutely perfect given the things you want to see. It's astonishing how accurate the TikTok algorithm is. So is TikTok solving a strong pain point for me? Not really, but it brings me great joy because it's showing me exactly what I just want to see, to be happy and to laugh and to enjoy myself. By the way, if anyone has to go, I have to go in a few minutes, but if anyone has to go, I just want to say thank you so much to Jimena and Rodrigo, the Venture City crew, and to everyone who showed up today. I'm really grateful for your time. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned a couple of things. Be in touch if you need anything. I'm so excited to move to the Miami area, by the way, and join that tech community in case you're there. So again, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I'm sticking around for a few more minutes if anyone has questions, and if Jimena and Rodrigo can stick around. So I can see a question from Ram from the QA window about what's a meaningful population size when you're undertaking research. So to really get at that, you need to run something called a power analysis, where you'd actually calculate what the sample size is that you need. But if you want to run a survey, for example, depending on the survey, there's no like single answer for this, but depending on the survey, you'd need at least probably hundreds of participants to have like meaningful answers to your data. Jimena, Rodrigo, do we have any other questions from people that I didn't get to?
Not in the QA.
Okay. Mark, I'm happy to talk about NFTs. I find it very interesting as well. So absolutely, feel free.
Oh, there's one actually from Borja. Hello, Borja. And it's, would you recommend to integrate NPS for brick and mortar, or are you just no NPS period?
No, I really wouldn't. Again, I mentioned that one of the big faults of NPS is that it's asking about future behavior. Another is that it's easily kind of gamed, essentially, so it's incredibly inaccurate. The statistical analysis of NPS is absolutely ridiculous. So from a data science point, it makes no sense at all. And it's overly complicated. If you're in a brick and mortar store, if you own several brick and mortar stores, you might have seen this like in airports and stuff, but you can buy these stands that just have like smiley faces. It's like 4, maybe 5 buttons, like green smiley face, yellow, red, and like sad and red. That's much simpler. It lets people just hit that button right then and there. It's physical. They don't have to like go online or use their phone or do anything like that. Much more effective than NPS. So why not use that? We all hate banks. What would you design for that? Well, that particular question is a little bit of a problematic question for me, because I work for a company that is also a bank, but I am not a financial advisor, and I am not certified or able to sell financial products. And so I'd rather not comment on that, because I'm just not in a regulatory and legal position to do so. You can check out where I work and see what you think for yourself. Okay, shall we end there, Jimena?
Yes, I think we can end here. Thank you again so much for doing this. We're super excited to have you in the Miami community. For those of us that are in Miami, please feel free to reach out to Noam and give him a warm welcome when he makes his way over here.
Awesome.
And then Rodrigo is just going to pop into the chat a quick little type form to gather your feedback, which I'm sure, Noam, you would have feedback on how we're gathering feedback. But please do, it'll help us just make our future Tertulias even better. And also we'll pass it on to Noam. So thank you again. A real pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a lovely rest of the day. Bye for now.
For your questions. Goodbye.